A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Axel Threlfall, editor-at-large with Reuters. The title of this session, Islamic Economy CEOs Debate, How Relevant Are Islamic Economy Sectors to Islamic Finance? Now, I mentioned the title in full to remind everyone that the word debate is in it. So my goal is to try and make it one. When I spoke with some of the panelists on the phone last week, the message I got was, let's make this as compelling, as engaging, as memorable as possible, break out of our comfort zones a little bit. I hope I read that correctly. So let's try and do just that. I will introduce them in just a moment, but first allow me a few words to set the scene. Of course, we've just had some pointed questions from Mohammed Yunus, which I will put to our panel in just a moment. A quick reminder, and as we heard from His Excellency Al-Manzouri, Malaysia takes the top spot in the Economy Indicator Index. UAE is number 2, Bahrain is number 3. The Islamic Finance Indicator, which evaluates countries on relative strengths of their finance ecosystems, also puts Malaysia number 1, Bahrain number 2, and UAE at number 3. We will talk about that. The finance sector, currently estimated at $1.8 trillion, with a total assets projected to reach $3.25 trillion by 2020, commercial banking assets to reach $2.6 trillion by then. Now, those figures certainly provide an impressive and valuable marker. The challenge, though, the question must be to what extent this growth is materializing into actual business opportunity. Yes, Islamic finance is expanding in terms of geographies, but growth in some core markets is slowing. We talk about an Islamic ecosystem, which I'm sure is well understood by most of you in this audience. The question has to be whether the man on the street understands it as well as you do. Surely that is the challenge, or one of the big challenges for Islamic finance. Just before we start, I just want to say one final thing. At the risk of seeming provocative, but given we want a debate, I wonder if we shouldn't turn the title around of this session. Rather than just ask how relevant Islamic sectors are to the banks, how these sectors can position themselves as viable and attractive investment opportunities, shouldn't we be asking how Islamic banks can be more relevant to Islamic economy sectors? Spot the opportunities, grab those opportunities, serve them better, be the glue linking these sectors together. How much more proactive do the banks feel they need to be in going after the opportunities out there? You know, they say don't rile the panelists until you're at least halfway through the session. I hope I haven't done that. Let me introduce everyone now. Tirad Mahmoud, CEO, Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank. Next to him is Dr. Adnan Chilwan, Group CEO, Dubai Islamic Bank. Jamal bin Gailaita, CEO, Emirates Islamic Bank. And finally, Mazin Al-Nahed, the CEO of Kuwait Finance House. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start, Mahmoud, with a question to you. And in fact, I'll throw this at all of you. Number 2, Islamic economy. Number 3 in those rankings, Islamic finance. How does UAE get to number 1?
I think that's a very good question. The challenge is big, but I think the determination, and the passion, and the support we have are much bigger. Today, the speech of His Excellency, the Governor of the Central Bank, outlined the Central Bank's plan and the government's plan to create a more hospitable environment for the Islamic banks and financial institutions. I think that is the first step in the right direction. Malaysia has been number 1 for a long time, and the main reason is that was a government-sponsored initiative. Her Excellency Dr. Zeti, the Governor of the Central Bank of Malaysia, herself embraced the concept. So they have spearheaded the initiative, and I think the UAE right now is doing the same thing. The second thing I want to say is that Dubai, the UAE, are a well-established country model. Very successful globally. Dubai now is competing among the top international cities. And Islamic banking in the UAE is not in its infancy. It's very competitive. It's very, very sophisticated. I think with the new direction that the Central Bank of the UAE has taken, I think getting to number one and remaining number one for a long time to come is not far from our grasp.
Adnan, let me ask you the same question. Can you get to number one? How quickly do you see that happening? What do you need to do? How does perhaps your perception of your role need to change to get to that?
Well, I think there's a reason why Mr. Muhammad Yunus was sitting on a black chair, because if I do that, I'll disappear. So that's why I'm sitting like this. So I think I echo with what Tirad has said to a certain extent. It needs to be, and what His Excellency Mr. Mansouri was saying, is needs to be a government-sponsored program, and he alludes to the fact that Her Excellency Dr. Zeti from Malaysia actually sponsored a program, but who better than His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid to put a program together and have a global vision to make Dubai the capital of the Islamic economy. If you actually look at the progress that Dubai has made since 2013, as opposed to the last 33 odd years since Islamic banking has been in existence with Dubai Islamic Bank, I think we have started to run at record speed. Today, Nasdaq Dubai, for example, has become the largest exchange that has Islamic sukuks listed. And that's only because there is passion, and there is only because there is a sense of direction.
My question, though, is do you think you are doing enough, quickly enough, to reach this spot?
Absolutely. Well, you see, while the government has initiated a plan in order to make sure that, there is an ambition to become number one, that is not going to be enough. You need public and private sector both to join hands, funneled by the financial services industry, in order to grow the other economic sectors within the Islamic economy. So I think if you look at the name of the summit is Global Islamic Economy Summit, but most of the time we start focusing on Islamic finance. There are other sectors within the economy that need to be focused on globally, not just within the UAE. And if we do that, through the Islamic finance as a catalyst, we'll be able to get to number one.
Jamal, is it a level playing field? Let me throw that in there as well. We hear a lot about competition with conventional banks. We hear a lot about trying to distinguish Islamic banks from conventional banks. Is the playing field level enough for you to get to number one?
If you ask me, I would say we need more all the time. We need regulation to get mature. We need the regulator work with us, as well as the standard which set I'm talking about accounting standard. I'm talking about the regulation. How do we become more partner? Because Islamic banks are not a conventional way of doing business. We are a different breed of banking. And if you say, are we doing enough? We are moving faster than banks. For last 15, 20 years, we've been growing double the growth of the conventional partner. And even at today's scenario, we're growing double the growth digit. Of course, the conventional banks are matured regulation compared to the Islamic banks. It's a 40 years old banking. But I think the government in initiating these moves, and this is why the summit is here, and we are trying, at our level best to reach. But the growth is one big sign for me. The regulators are listening today, the central bank talking about, having a better regulation. Regulating the Sharia board is the third part, which is really what will help the growth come along.
We will discuss the regulator in just a second. Mazin, let me throw you a similar question. What do you perceive as your role? And let me actually inject into this something that Muhammad Yunus said. The banks don't want to take risks with SMEs, and this is the problem. Do you agree with that?
I agree and disagree. I agree in a way because there are certain regulations that limit the pricing of risk of such SMEs. And I disagree with that because there are government projects or government programs that support the SMEs, and as such we're working with them now, specifically in Kuwait, in order for us to facilitate financing for SMEs. Now, the new programs are lucrative as far as banks are concerned, and they cover the risk element of it. Because ultimately, we would like to support SMEs, but we would like to also price for risk as far as SMEs are concerned. And in order for the government to support them, they are going to provide them with subsidized funding. The subsidized funding is going to complement the commercial funding that comes from the bank at market rate, and the combined average cost to the SME is significantly lower.
But how can you price somebody who actually cannot pay?
Say that again?
How can you price someone who actually is starting up his business,
Yes.
is incubating his business,
Yes.
is looking for financing, and then us bankers actually have this bandwagon saying that we support SMEs, but we support SMEs with horrendous rates because we want to price risk.
Right.
So I think we've got this wrong completely. I think if you want to actually say you support SMEs, then you've got to do it with your heart and not just lip service. Because banks around the world keep talking about SME because these are government-led programs.
Yeah.
But nobody within the UAE actually supporting
Who
SMEs.
here supports SMEs then?
But I'd like to add just
Yeah.
something. There's a lot of research that was done on the SME sector in the Islamic countries. Enormous research done. Specifically for the Arabian Peninsula, a lot of research was done. The research shows that the SMEs, like the individuals, are more likely to reach out and seek financial support, financings, and credit if it was Sharia compliant. They're driven by faith, and I think Islamic banks, once they have introduced SME banking, the SMEs found this to be a very encouraging sign. Our experience, Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank in the UAE has been extremely successful in the SME. In fact, it is fast growing, much more than any other commercial banking that we do. Similarly, in Egypt, where we have 70 branches, our experience in the SME has been extremely successful. It's much more fast than any other business that we do. So the issue of pricing risk is relevant for all sectors of banking, but the SME specifically in the Muslim communities, Islamic banks are ideal, much more ideal than conventional banks for many, many reasons, not just faith. I think we are much more capable of doing long-term investment financing, warehouse financing, real estate financing, equipment and plant financing for the SMEs.
Okay, Jamal, I'd like to get your view on this, and let me add to it this question. Whether you feel you can now convince increasingly sophisticated customers that your banks are different from conventional banks.
So if we talk about product innovation, Islamic banks at the forefront for last, I've seen from 2000 till now, banks have introduced, the Islamic bank introduced much more products compared to conventional party, because we have example, lots of product related to even Sukuk's example. The Sukuk was very plain in the past. Now is a more sophisticated, rated Sukuk, not like the past is unrated. If you look at the even funds, we have a lot more funds in place. If you go back even to SME, Emirates Islamic Bank today balance sheet is about 40% of its lending is to small and medium enterprises. I agree with my friend Tarad here. Is the risk? We are more equipped to help the SMEs entrepreneur in place. We understand the business. We know how they run. We have the experience, and the entrepreneur, like even the other party, always require finance and also experience.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I've been inspired by His Excellency Professor Muhammad Yunus. Yesterday we hosted him for the Ethical Finance Award that Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank in partnership with Thomson Reuters conducts annually. And he gave a similar speech last night, but today your speech had much more flavor than yesterday. So I'm lucky and fortunate to have heard you twice. I want to hear you 3 times. I don't know what else you're hiding up your sleeve. But I just wanted to add something. The paradigm that you have introduced is a very powerful paradigm. And I think, I don't think it's competing with the conventional banks or Islamic banks. It is covering uncovered space. And I would like to call it FUBU banking, for us and by us banking, for those that have not been covered by the likes of conventional banks. And banks that are Islamic are for, profit-making institutions. We have investors who want a return on their investment. So I think you have complemented the ecosystem. I don't think we have competition, but without you, the world will be a much worse place to have.
Mazin, and to that point, I go back to my open when I mentioned the Islamic ecosystem, which I'm sure is well understood by this audience. Does the man on the street understand it well enough? Is that not the challenge that Islamic finance needs to grow beyond its core constituency?
Well, without a doubt, Islamic banking came about not too long ago, I would say the beginning of the 70s, and I would consider it compared to conventional banks in its infancy. We've developed significantly in terms of products, in terms of services that we offer to our clients that are equivalent or even better than conventional bank products. Taking into account the values of Islamic banking in terms of ethical banking, if I wanted to keep it in a more simple form, ethical banking is more appealing to the general public. I'm not talking only the consumers or the retail sector, I'm talking about even the wholesale sector. There is a general feel and general want to transfer from conventional banks to Islamic banks, and it's actually witnessed in our growth rates. You would wonder, why would Islamic banks grow faster than conventional banks? You would say that initially it's because of its initial size, it's very small, so the growth percentages are high. But if you look at market shares today, take Kuwait for example, Islamic banks command a 45% market share, which is significant, which is very, very significant. Keeping in mind that the number of conventional banks to Islamic banks is at least 3 to 4 times.
Yeah. You know, I'm wary of the time, and there's a lot I want to get through. I want to talk about the regulator. I hear this a lot, this idea of a lack of a level playing field. I think you used the phrase on the phone, a lack of oxygen. Is that really fair, that you are not getting enough support from the regulator in the UAE?
I think if you look at the future, and today I'm very optimistic and very excited. What you have heard today from His Excellency, the Governor of the Central Bank, is a new page in the life of Islamic banking in the UAE. And I'm really looking forward to what happens next. We want to be at par with the conventional banks. We have not been at par with them since the birth of Islamic banking, since the birth of DIB.
Yeah.
It's been a struggle. And I want to thank our loyal customers who, because of them, Islamic banks have been able to grow. It's not because of the hospitality of the regulatory regimes in the countries where Islamic banks
what do you
exist.
Need, excuse me for interrupting. What do you need to see? And actually, let me, Adnan, start with you on this. What do you need to see from the regulator which would create a level playing field? Give me a specific here.
I think a separate set of regulations need to be put in place for Islamic banks, because the general modus operandi of Islamic banks is different, where it is more asset-backed and asset-based rather than indulging in debt. So you need, you can have common regulations that governs the entire banking system, but if you want Islamic banking to actually grow within this part of the world and some of the neighboring countries, you need separate regulations around liquidity, you need separate regulations around capital, and allocation of that capital, because the very essence of Islamic banking and very essence of Islamic finance is you need to route the application through a transaction. And that transaction takes form of an asset-based or an asset-backed approach. Unfortunately, even though Islamic banking started in 1975, the regulator did not have adequate regulations in place, and that's why till date, we have the same set of rules that apply to Islamic banks. Having said that, over the last couple of years, we've seen giant strides from the regulator in trying to at least hear what Islamic finance practitioners have to say.
Yeah. What do you think on the regulator side? What do you need to see, and do you agree with these gentlemen?
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to say is Islamic banks play a role of a trader. You know, they own their assets. So when I finance you, I work with assets. So when you work with assets, the accounting treatment for those assets should be different than as a conventional way. So it's the international accounting standard which regulator is imposing and including ESCA with that, and what business we are in. We are in a business of trading. We hold assets. We are a partner. We are not independent only financer. We should be more a partner. We play the ethic role. We are there with our clients. So the accounting is different. We run a different risk.
Yeah.
So if I'm running a different risk, I should not be accounted like a conventional way of doing so.
I can give you concrete requirements that we would have. Number one, Islamic banks need liquidity management tools.
Exactly.
Where they can invest their abundant liquidity, get the accounting treatment for that, and have this liquidity profitable. In many countries in the MENA region, Islamic banks keep their liquidity idle, not earning anything.
Yeah.
So this puts them at a disadvantage. For Basel requirements, they have to maintain a certain percentage of their total assets in liquid form. But in many, many cases, they keep them in non-profitable liquid forms. So this is one thing that only regulators can change. The second thing that we need is to standardize the issue of documentation.
Yes.
Banks have a paramount need to have legal agreements standardized. The conventional banks have hundreds of years behind them in standardizing documentation. Islamic banks do not. It's a new industry. It's still in its infancy. And a regulator can bring standardization for the legal documentation that banks can use. The third thing is standardizing legislation for Islamic banks. Islamic banks are governed by two regulators. We don't have one. Conventional banks have one regulator. We have two. We have the Sharia regulation and we have the central bank regulation. And we have to basically please both. And standardizing the legislation is required. We cannot do it on our own. It has to come from a regulator. These three things, once they're done, I think the level playing field will become a reality.
Yeah. Basim.
I think that, speaking at least from Central Bank of Kuwait, we've came a long way since the introduction of, or I would say the governing of Islamic banking overall in general. We have seen significant development in that regard, bringing conventional bank regulations very close to Islamic banking. However, they would never be the same. Market reasons between the two is the structure of our deposits and the nature of the contracts with our clients. For example, we have a significant portion of our deposit base in the form of mudaraba, which means that we are profit sharing with our customers any potential profit that would come out of this transaction. Now, this has a beautiful advantage in the reduction of the risk-weighted assets of this transaction in comparison with conventional banks. This gives us an advantage over pricing. This gives us an advantage that conventional banks do not have. I want to talk about the positive things for now. So as such, this is something that Islamic banks have an advantage over conventional banks. Now, on the other hand, conventional banks have other advantages that Islamic banks do not have. For example, if you have a customer and he would like to prepay, there is naturally no more interest to be accrued, while in Islamic banks, it's a contract where we have purchased and sold. So it's an obligation that has to be paid at that point in time. And as such, these are some of the disadvantages of Islamic banking compared to conventional banks when it comes to the customer.
Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah, I think what mentioned by the colleagues is critical and it's important. But, we are evolving. You cannot say we are not going to be at standing. The regulators last 2 or 3 years have changed a lot. But as I said, the international standards are changed, the accounting standard, which really affecting the Islamic bank. It's making it disadvantage to us, which put pressure on the regulator here. You're not playing only in your domestic market. You're playing into the international market. So international market expect you to beat the international standard and the international risk management. So all of these are really putting pressure on the Islamic banks. But we are still, alhamdulillah, growing very fast.
Yeah.
We are still meeting all our what we want to meet our goals.
I want to, Adnan, talk to you about standardization, a global board in general. Again, this is one of the big discussions we have when we talk about Islamic banking. Do you worry that something like that could dampen competition in the sector?
Yes, I do. Listen, I think to a certain extent you need standardization. And we keep talking about, the conventional banking space is very standardized. It is not. There are some basic set of rules that govern them. But if you start talking about standardization within Islamic finance, I think what people misunderstand is, I think what they want to say is we should work collectively, rather than standardize.
Do you agree with that?
Working collectively is fine, but when you start standardizing everything, so for example, you've got standard products, standard structures, standard set of bells and whistles, you're going to kill competition. And if you kill competition, the industry is not going to go forward, it will go backward.
So when you say working collectively, what exactly do you mean? Because I was thinking about this beforehand. I started by saying Malaysia's number one, Bahrain number two, UAE number three. Should we stop thinking like that? Should this stop being a race to number one? Should we work collectively, and that should be the mentality?
No, I think when you talk about standardization and working collectively, so for example, you've got to make sure that legislation is put in place, and legislation cannot be just put by regulators. There has to be a collective input from financial practitioners and regulators alike, and that is what you need within the Islamic finance industry. We are looking at that happening within UAE as we speak. You heard the governor in the morning. But when you start talking about let's just standardize everything, then what's the point? I think all of us are born differently. We've got unique characteristics, and I think we need to make sure that our identity is preserved. Islamic finance should not start replicating anyone. It should have its collective edge, and within Islamic banks also, we should have a collective edge in terms of competition.
Mazin?
Back to Dr. Adnan's point, I think that standardization is going to achieve a very good thing overall in terms of the loan agreements that would take place between banks, the loan agreements. So in essence, we need to standardize products in order for us to be easier to manage those products and understand them better, and be able to share risk amongst other banks, and to have as much as possible unified Sharia approval on those products. However, what we should be differentiating ourselves with is the features of the product and or the service. This, in my opinion, is going to be the differentiator. Today, if you walk into a conventional bank, you would see pretty much all the products are standard. The differentiation is in the features of those products. So ultimately, what we would like to differentiate ourselves with is service.
Service. And go ahead very quickly, and I want to come back to this because we talked about this.
I think we're talking across purposes with respect to standardization, but I just want to address it to convey the point. You cannot industrialize a process. You cannot go into mass production. You cannot go to multiple markets. You cannot scale up if everything you do is non-standard. So the standardization we need is to help the industry grow much faster. But I agree with both Dr. Adnan and my colleague, the CEO of KFH, that where we need to maintain uniqueness is in features and is in innovation. But the base of it has to be standardized. Otherwise, this will always become and remain a local industry. You need to industrialize and scale up and become more universal. It becomes portable, plug and play. Otherwise, we stay home.
Okay.
We'll never go big.
So that's the core. You talked, KFH, I know you've been doing a lot on the service side, and I believe I'm right in saying you've lost a lot of people as you make that shift, right?
Yes.
Why?
Well, if you want to talk specifically about Kuwait Finance House, it's worthwhile to talk about the history and the legacy. The history and the legacy was an establishment that was established in 1977, and it was not regulated by anybody at the time. It was regulated by Ministry of Commerce. The license that it had was vast. It can do anything pretty much in the market, including banking. So they've started in building multiple businesses, including the banking business. So KFH as a company was a collective of many things, including a bank. Now, post-2003, when the Central Bank of Kuwait introduced the new banking regulation governing Islamic banks, KFH has to change its DNA. And that shift and change had taken into account the new capital requirements, what do you need as a bank and as investment companies in terms of capital to sustain moving forward? And is this deployment of capital giving you the right rate of return for those investments or not? This is what we need to do.
Yep.
So we've started an initiative, especially with Basel III, where we would look at our assets and try to conserve as much as possible on the capital-heavy assets. Dispose of them, restructure them, do whatever it takes to reduce the capital weight on it. Because, you know, our most important resource today is our human capital, and the second most important is our capital base.
Okay, thank you very much, Adnan.
Axel, listen, we've been talking about standardization and we want to take Islamic banking and Islamic finance global. I keep saying we want to make it the norm of banking. Norm of banking and making it global is not going to happen through standardization. Very humble opinion, right? If you want something you never had, you have to do something you never have. We've got to go into territories where we've not gone into. If you look at the entire Muslim population, and if you look at where OIC countries stand within those Muslim populations, right? We've not penetrated Islamic finance within OIC countries itself. It's 4% or below, one. Two is if you look at the entire Muslim population around the world, Africa holds 1/3 of the Muslim population, and all of that is on that East African belt.
Yeah.
Who has gone there? You look at Far East Asia. We keep talking about Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and we keep talking about 1, 2, 3. Indonesia has 250 million Muslims.
So what can
How
we
many Islamic
So what can we
banks
expect Dubai Islamic to do in Africa? now?
charter into these territories? And that is exactly what we've done.
Is there anything you can share with us here?
Absolutely, we can. We've obviously made our ambitions public. We are looking at Far East Asia. We now operate in Indonesia. We have 40% of a bank in Indonesia.
That was announced yesterday, right?
Yes, that was announced yesterday. We are already setting up shop on ground in Kenya. So Kenya is going to be the entry point in the East African belt. India is another country that has the second largest Muslim population. So when we talk about making Islamic finance global, are we even targeting the right geographies? And if we are targeting the right geographies, how are we targeting them? Gone are those days where you can just go and tell people this is, faith-based banking. It is not anymore. If you want to take a flight from here to Heathrow, you are not going to go to a travel agent and you will not tell the travel agent, give me an airline that is the most safest. Give me an airline that is the most safest. Why? Because safety is within the DNA of the travel industry. You will tell them, give me an airline which is superior in service. Give me an airline which is convenient. It has fantastic time, good food, excellent entertainment. Islamic practitioners should stop calling, if you're a Muslim, you should have Islamic finance. That's not the way we should position our franchise. We need to tell people that, guys, you now have an option which is hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with conventional banks. And this is what we have to offer. And guess what? We do our business
So
Islamically.
why has it taken so long for you to do that?
Because
or to start doing that?
Because practitioners were focused on making sure that it was faith-based banking. Mosques are not built by Muslims alone. When you're building a mosque, you have people from all religions that build a mosque. So if you want Islamic finance to become global, I would suggest that stop just talking about faith-based banking because we are never going to compromise Sharia compliance. Never ever will we say that we want to do something which is non-Sharia compliant. But what we need to do is we need to position our proposition completely.
Jamal.
So I agree with my colleague here. The issue is innovation is not lacking. We are at a same level field as conventional in terms of innovation, offering services. We have offered just now an e-trade as Emirates Islamic Bank, and this e-trade in the past it takes you forever to establish an LC, letter of credit. So banks, Islamic banks, really, and with them the scholar are able to get rid of a lot of processes and move away from these and able to offer a trade products which is electronics. So what I'm trying to say is, we can be a forefront, and even we can be very innovative, and we can reach market even if there is no Islamic regulators. We have entered in markets. People are in London and in different markets offering Sharia compliant products.
Yep.
You can offer your product across the globe and lots of customers, but we should not be same. So if you're offering, conventional, it's apple, and if you're offering Islamic, it should be banana. It's different thing. So the risk is different. The accounting should be different. The regulation should be different.
I guess, Mazin, I want to bring you in here. I'm trying to move this debate forward a little bit.
Yeah.
You would have sat here a year ago, 2 years ago, and said exactly the same thing, right?
Huh?
Why are we not moving forward? Or is that unfair of me to say that?
I would say this is unfair to say because we
You don't
have
think it's unfair?
developed significantly, specifically on the debt capital markets. In Sukuk, I can give you KFH as example. In Sukuk, for example, we've issued Sukuk last year for the government of South Africa. South Africa in the past had not even considered issuance of Islamic products, and they were tapping the bond markets. So we are making strides into educating certain governments, certain institutions about the value of Islamic finance, and particularly when it comes to debt capital markets. So we are improving in that space.
Yep.
In addition, we're gaining market share within the jurisdictions that we are operating in significantly faster than the conventional banks.
Okay.
So we are developing.
Okay, so there's progress you're developing. I imagine you agree with that, but I can't help feeling there is frustration here on your part.
I don't think there is frustration. I think there is an opportunity out there, and we're not grasping the entire opportunity. Islamic banks have been growing faster than conventional banks. They're very profitable. We have been told that Christine Lagarde is impressed that we improve the systemic risk globally. Even the Pope of the Vatican spoke about Islamic banking in a very positive way. So I don't think there is any frustration. The issue here is the potential out there is far greater than people imagine. And we think we can grow much faster and much bigger and become a more serious global player. In the UAE, we have not reached 20% market share. We need to think about 50% market share in the UAE. This is the issue, is we think we can be much bigger. But I want to go back to something much more fundamental and much more basic. Nobody talks about the real value proposition that Islamic banks bring. I mean, how relevant are we? Are we different from conventional banks? Everybody speaks about Islamic banking in a positive way, but no one has really spoken about the value proposition. Some say it's faith-based banking, and I say, yes, it is. Others say it's ethical banking, and I say, yes, it is. Others say, well, we support sustainable development, and I say, yes, that is the case. So what is the true value proposition of Islamic banking? I think today, the industry where it is, it's in a very good shape. It's being admired by others. But the scholars of Islamic banks, they're a very important stakeholder. They really have to be part of this discussion and debate. We cannot debate without them because they regulate us. The scholars and the practitioners and the regulators have to come to an agreement in terms of the new value proposition of Islamic banking. Is it simply Sharia compliance, or is it ethical banking, or is it sustainable banking? I think it's all of the above. And there is demand out there that we can satisfy. Today, we have taken only a small part of that pent-up demand.
Okay, Adnan.
We've made progress. You were asking whether we highlighted this a couple of years ago. That is exactly what we did. I'm not going to market Dubai Islamic Bank, but that is exactly what we did. 2 years ago, I said, guys, let's go into uncharted territories. Now, what do? I did not speak to Christine Lagarde, nor did I speak to the Pope. What we did was we took this forward, and today as we speak, we have operations in the countries that we said we should have operations in. India is the next logical step, because just look at some of these countries that we are mentioning. OIC countries, look at Indonesia, look at Africa, and look at India. If you sell, even if you want to look at the economics here and try to make commercial sense for the shareholder, you sell lollipops in this country, you will become a billionaire. Right?
Yeah.
So this is a market. We've got to take Islamic finance to these areas in order to make it global.
Very quickly, Jamal.
I think I agree with you, and with that we can go overseas with our product. We can reach. By
You
the
agree
way,
with lollipops? Or?
Yeah, finance lollipops, so you lick them. Okay, so the idea is we go into these markets. I agree, but you can reach them, Adnan, with products. You don't have to reach them with banking. So we can reach them with funds. We can reach them with other. And talking about Sharia boards, they are very flexible. I mean, and they're very innovative. They actually in our area, in Emirates Islamic Bank, they actually came out with the ideas. They are the one who initiated some of these ideas. So, we have to say that, it's the work between business and Sharia, and making the business, say the right things to the Sharia, so they can structure the product and the finance to these. But we want, as we discussed, the business is, the top segment, middle segment, and lower segments. So we need to approach these segments differently, And we already have the product. We just need the push. And I think the team and the banks. And remember, we're 7 banks in the market compared to 40 banks or more in this market, And still we're growing, alhamdulillah, and we're doing well.
I have a final question for each of you, and I want to bring something in that Mohammed Yunus mentioned as well. And the question is, again, what I started with. The session, how relevant are Islamic economy sectors to Islamic finance? Is that the right question, or should we be asking it the other way around? Mohammed Yunus said problems that are unresolved, do the reverse. Does that sit, what we heard earlier, with your thinking as the CEOs of your banks? And again, tell me if you think it is fair that we pose the question the way we posed it this morning. Go ahead.
Well, are they important? I would say absolutely, because Islamic banks ultimately can only deal with institutions that comply with, or accept the form and the contract of an Islamic bank, and as such, they have to accept it. So from that angle, we, as Islamic banks, are not allowed to lend certain industries. For example, alcohol, for example, cigarettes. Let's put it this way. Sharia and ethical cover on all of those products or economic sectors that we would not be able to lend to. As such, we wouldn't anticipate to lend to those. However, I would like to point out one thing in terms of innovation in that space. In the past, financing hotels was a no-no, an absolute no-no. Nowadays, we are actually financing dry hotels. So there is development in certain aspects that we previously could not do.
I'm going to have to rush you. We are running out of time. Jamal, same question to you. Let me ask it like this. Are you content with how proactive you are being?
I think we are proactive. We are doing a lot of things. We are bringing new things. But I don't think we're doing yet enough. We can do more. There is lots of potential. I mean, despite what we're saying, a lot of my colleagues, we did a lot of initiative and we moved a long way. But we still have a long way to go, as my colleague. We are not, if we take our market share in the global banking, we're still a small market share. And we have to be providing something different. That's what I want to say.
Adnan, I'll pose it a different way. Have Islamic banks rested on their laurels for too long?
Yes, absolutely. I think we've been resting on our laurels for too long. We've got to pull up our socks and start, this is not about lip service anymore, right? When Mr. Yunus talks about, Grameen Bank, for that matter, this was a thought that he had. He went ahead and he did it. I think far too many seminars have passed, far too many summits have passed. We keep talking about the same things.
Right.
I think we need to come forward and just take this.
And finally, will you get the level playing field you desire? Will you get the oxygen that you need in the near future?
I think the trend has begun in Malaysia. I think Dubai is the next, the UAE is the next. And once that happens, I think you'll see Islamic banks in this country reach 50% market share by the end of this decade. I don't see why we can't do that.
Mazin Al-Nahed, Jaman Bil Galeta, Dr. Adnan Chilwan, and Tirad Mahmood, thank you very much indeed for your insight and for your candor this morning. We got a little bit of debate in there, but I think it was very informative. I thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.